A lot of people are much happier employed than they will be owning their own business.
I'm not always the biggest fan of financial advisors.
It's great making money, but if you lose a lot of it in taxes, then it's pointless.
They initially introduced taxes to redistribute wealth a little bit. What ends up happening is that the middle class and the working class are the ones who end up paying the taxes because
You need to save more than you spend.
show me your bank account and I'll show you what's important to
Yeah.
you. Where did you get that from?
You're not serious about retiring early. You were serious about enjoying and living for the moment.
What you care about.
Exactly. I have a house in the UK and I have a house in Dubai. It's a horrendous investment, my house here. If you're just saving for the point of it, you will never do as well as if you have a structured goal.
If you are going to give some milestones, what would you say?
I hope you guys are excited to get into this episode. Don't forget, if you would like to purchase an investment property in Dubai, make sure to fill out the form below and book a free consultation with me. Welcome to the Building Wealth with No Borders podcast with me, Lamide Elizabeth, where I'll be bringing you guests from around the world to share their strategies on building wealth. And today we are filming at Myriad Studios. So if you are looking for a reliable and professional studio, then you should definitely check them out. And we are here with financial advisor, accountant, CEO, and founder of Hoxton Wealth, Chris Ball. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
So for those who this is their first time coming across you, can you just introduce yourself?
So I am a 38-year-old, initially an accountant, but now a financial planner. I started my career in 2004 with KPMG, trained with them as an accountant, as a tax advisor. And in 2011, I decided that there was a lot of the work that I was doing on the personal tax side was predominantly revolved around wealth. So I decided to become or get into wealth management or financial planning, financial advice, whatever you want to call it. So I moved out of the UK and I moved to Abu Dhabi. So I started my career there in international financial planning in 2011. I worked for a company called DeVere Group for a number of years there. Had a really good time and really enjoyed myself. And then in 2018, I decided to set up Hoxton Wealth with my partner, Matt, who I went to school with. So kind of got that school buddy relationship, which was pretty cool. And we started it around my kitchen table in Abu Dhabi. He was based in Watford. And we started off with $35 million of assets. And currently we manage about 3.3 billion of assets from here, US, UAE, Europe, and Australia.
That's amazing. I think one of the reasons why I'm really excited about this conversation, because not only are you like a tax advisor, financial advisor, which we get on the show quite a bit, but you're also a successful entrepreneur, having 3 billion in assets under management and having multiple offices. Not only do you speak about helping other people manage their wealth, but you've also built your own wealth through your business. So I think I'm really excited about the conversation because actually I'm not always the biggest fan of financial advisors.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes. I think I'm very big on but I don't think it's a fair assessment. But I do when it comes to advice that I take for myself. So I'm not necessarily talking about other people, but for myself, I like to take advice from people who have done it and not necessarily always people who have studied it and like kind of have a playbook of like, this is what you should do because this is what they told me to tell you to do. So that's a personal thing, but I really respect that you have gone through that part, but then you've also built your own business and built your own wealth. So I think the insights that you're going to share are going to be really good. But before we get into that, it'd be good to kind of just learn a bit more about your background.
So I started, like I said, my career with KPMG as a tax advisor, and I think that gave me a really good base I think accounting generally gives you a really good base in business. I think whereas Warren Buffett always says that, it's one of the basic business principles you should learn or always try and learn, obviously public speaking being one of them, but the second is accounting because it helps you understand businesses, the way they operate, the way to do things, the way not to do things.
I actually want to go before that, before you got into taxes. What was it like growing up?
Okay. So I am from a very working class background. My mum actually, when I was growing up, used to work in a newspaper print. So she used to type the newspapers. So
On
she
that
used to work
thing
in
with
exactly. Yeah, I'm not that old. It was an actual typewriter, but it was on a computer. So she used to work there in the night. She used to look after me and my sister in the day. And my dad was a panel beater and then was an insurance assessor.
What's a panel beater?
So bangs the dents out of cards.
Okay.
Yeah. So he used
Like
to
a
work in a
mechanic?
body shop. Yeah, like a mechanic, but specialising in body repair. I suppose when you get a dent, he would do it, and then he decided it was too cold to work outside, and then wanted to go and work inside to become an insurance assessor.
Okay.
So I actually originally wanted to be a mechanic. And my dad and mum persuaded me not to leave school at 16 and to go and try and get a job with money. My dad said, if you go and work with money, you will tend to have lots of money. And that, he didn't want the same kind of career path, I suppose, he took for me. So he pushed me into that. So I left school. I failed my first year of A levels as well. I had to do 3 years at A level because I failed my first year.
What happened?
I just didn't enjoy the subjects I was taking. I had no interest in
What
them.
subjects were those?
They were, if I remember rightly, they were computer technology, electronics, and maths with statistics.
Oof.
And in the end, I went back and did really well. So I ended up getting 3 A's when I did them the second time round. But I did business, economics, and maths with statistics because they were things I liked.
Yeah.
So
What made you want to do electronics and what was the other one?
So I did all right with them in
IT.
GCSEs. So in my GCSEs, I got okay grades. So I thought, well, I'll kind of go there and figure it out. I had no idea what I wanted to be.
Yeah.
And I think that was the issue. There was no kind of set focus or, set like that. That's where I want to be. So that's how I've got to get there. And that all changed in my second year, or at the end of my first year, that I knew I was going to fail. Because I went into London on a school leaver day at KPMG, and I went up to their offices. I saw what it was about. I got to go in the train. I got to wear a suit, and I was thinking, "Oh, this is really cool." I'd really want to do this.
Yeah.
And then that made me super focused to study for my exams and get better grades, so I could become an accountant.
I love that. I think the reason why I always like to get people to talk a little bit about their background, and I think yours is important as well, is because sometimes when people hear. We have a lot of people who come from like relatively privileged backgrounds, but then sometimes there are people who don't come from those backgrounds. And when they hear it, they immediately discount themselves or attribute the success that that person has to their background.
Yeah.
So I think knowing that you have come from a working class background and your parents haven't had the, swanky jobs, if there are other people who are like you, it will open their ears a little bit more and make them have that belief that actually it is possible. Okay, so then from that leavers day, I'm guessing that's how you got into KPMG.
Yeah, well, yeah, I then had to go away and get the exams that were needed.
Yeah.
So they put you through this whole triage of tests and interviews and presentations and all this good stuff. And I managed to get through. And then it got to the last point, which was, okay, you need 3 Bs at A level to go on the school leaver program. So they whittled 1,000 of us down to 5. So it was pretty intense. I imagine a lot of people probably passed the test, the initial tests and things like that, verbal reasoning and maths. And I then went on their school leaver program, and I was with KPMG for 7 years. And I found that a really, really good base.
Why did you choose taxes? Because I feel like when
Why did you choose tax? Because it's really boring, is what you're going to say. What is that?
When we talk about like going into, I guess when I was at uni and we were talking about like, okay, what sort of divisions or in finance, where do you want to go? People are always like, avoid audit, avoid tax. So why did you choose taxes, or how did you end up in taxes? Did you like it?
Probably because I didn't go to university and no one said to me, you should avoid audit and tax. I was very, very happy that I did avoid audit. When I got there, nothing against auditors at all, of course, but I did do some tax audits, and I did find the testing, and I did find it quite monotonous, and it is quite high pressure. I mean, you're having to do a lot of work in a very short space of time, typically.
Yeah.
But it's when I got into what I really liked about tax was the compliance side is the compliance side, but I actually really enjoy the advice, and I was super lucky. So when I got into KPMG, there was 2 sides. There was the compliance side and the advice side. So you do a little bit of compliance work, but actually a lot of the interesting stuff happened in advice. And I was in consumer industrial markets, which again sounds horrendously boring, but it was in oil and gas. And it was big, massive transactions these guys were working on how to help these huge oil majors lower their taxation. And a guy called Alistair Monroe, who wrote the book on foreign tax, was one of the partners in the tax team that I work. So I was working with him, learning from him, and so many others, Tom Lobb and Mike Michaels, and all these people that really, gave me a lot of really interesting work to do. So it was more on the legislation and more on the, how you help people lower taxes and tax advice work that was, for huge corporations, Shell, BP, Tate Lyle, all these, corporations you'd have heard of, we was working on, which was cool. So actually when I got there, I wasn't, kind of bored. I was, it's quite exciting.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. Did it change your mind about anything about how the world really works? Because We don't really learn about taxes in school. I don't think
Mm,
so. I think I probably learned a little bit about taxes at university, but probably from the standpoint of like I did economic history, so probably from the standpoint of like inequality or something like that. But where I did learn about taxes was Rich Dad Poor Dad.
mm.
And there's that whole I don't know if it's a chapter or if it's a paragraph where he's basically talking about how they initially introduced taxes to redistribute wealth a little bit, take some money from the wealthy and then kind of redistribute it to the poor. But then he was talking about how actually what ends up happening is that the middle class and the working class are the ones who end up paying the taxes because rich people have tax advisors
Mm.
that, are able to work around the system. And then basically income taxes in particular, obviously, not like if you're talking about inheritance tax, stuff like that, it's a little bit different. But income taxes in particular end up not screwing, but the burden is felt more by the working class and the middle class. And that kind of really opened up my eyes to taxes. And he spoke a lot about like limited companies, and then rich versus wealthy, having an income versus owning a business. And that really opened up my eyes to taxes and shaped a lot of like what even I do right now,
Mm.
because I kind of realized that, oh, this game isn't quite as fair as you would think it is. So I'm just wondering from your standpoint, like what did that, if anything, did you learn about taxes at your
I mean, I learned a lot about taxes just through my exams and through in practice. So I did a stint in corporate tax and I did a stint in personal tax. And actually,
Mm.
I really like personal tax because I like the personal interaction. And so that's where you get into how to utilize limited
Yeah.
companies rather than getting paid as employment income, how to whether you pay yourself dividends, how much salary you take. And actually, what you started to realize was actually a lot of. I think it's. I think the system is fair
Mm.
because the tools are open to all, but it's the level of sophistication of the person and how much they want to delve into it.
Mm.
And like most people could do their job as some kind of contractor or set it up in a way that maybe would be more tax efficient for them than just getting employment income. But having being paid through PAYE is it's just the normal way that you do it. You don't really question it too much.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel that as you start to gain more wealth, you will typically start to question those things. And is that the right way? And should I be doing it that way? And is there a more efficient way that I can do it?
Mm.
Um, so
But I
yeah,
think people don't know that though.
mm,
Because like when I see debates online, right, and people are, I think and I think this is where like financial education stuff comes into it, because when they're talking about like raising income taxes and stuff, and people will be like, I don't know, I see a lot of debate. Let's say people who are on average on 30K and they're like arguing with people who are on like 100K, and they think like the people on 100K, like, yeah, you deserve to be taxed 50% because, you're earning so and so so. And it's like, but you don't really understand the magnitudes to the wealth that is out there. And the person who is on 100K is probably in a lot more similar position to you than actually some of the wealthiest people out there.
yeah,
But people don't know that. And people don't understand that, like, they think that, let's say, an increase in income tax, yeah, like that is not necessarily a tax on wealth. That's a tax on income. And those
mm,
two things are different. And I don't think that and I guess that's what's not fair, is the lack of education around taxes and
mm.
how it actually works and how different taxes affect different people.
So it's kind of the lack of education as well, just around personal finance too. In general,
Mm,
it's not just on taxes; it's around
it's
people
true.
saving. You don't get taught at school why you should save more than you spend, or
Right.
you should live within your means.
Mm.
I think people are doing a much better job of it now.
Yeah.
Certainly, when I was at school, it was just never talked about. I mean, even with my parents, I didn't even have these conversations.
Mm.
So I 100% agree with you that there is a clear lack of education. But what you were saying is that what did it teach me as well? One of the things I learned, it's great making money, but if you lose a lot of it in taxes, then it's pointless. What's the point? If it's all going in tax, then why would you make it? And actually, the other thing that it taught me working there was a lot of taxes can be planned around.
Mm.
And that and just doing a bit of planning and trying to be a bit more switched on with how you save, how you invest, utilizing things that are available to you. And it doesn't have to be insanely complicated, but I would notice the people that would take a lot of not care with it, but would take an interest in that would typically be the ones that were better off.
Yeah. What would you say to people? Because we've had this conversation on taxes a couple of times on the channel, and there's always that person who is like, well, why are you complaining about taxes? How do you think we would get like free education? Or how do you think the NHS is funding? Or how do you think we have XYZ going on? What
Mm.
would you say to those people who are like, who have those opinion?
I think you should 100% pay your tax.
Mm,
Like 100% pay your tax.
exactly.
I'm not saying that you should try and not pay it. And it's definitely important for society, particularly in places where there's not huge amounts of natural resource that the government can tap into, such as the UAE and other places. However, I think you have a duty to pay the right amount of tax, and if you can plan around that, then you should. Like I said, it's open to all. You shouldn't try and game the system, but at the same time, um, you know, taxing people very highly will not attract lots of wealth to your country. That's just a fact. The higher you raise tax rates, the more wealth that exits, the less tax dollars there are to, taxable amounts that there actually are to tax. So your tax revenue would generally fall. What you want is a fair system. I define fair, I suppose, but you want a system that obviously enables the country to operate, but at the same time doesn't make it prohibitive to be wealthy. And also, like maybe what you're seeing a bit at the moment is that I start a business, it starts doing well, and then I'm like, right, I'm out of here. I'm
Mm.
looking for somewhere else to then spend my wealth once I've accumulated it.
Yeah. And I think that's the point. And like being, I guess, efficient about the taxes that you pay does not mean that you're against taxes.
No,
Like, yeah, like saying that I don't want, I don't know, a portion of my income for 50% of it to go to the tax man does not mean that I don't think 10% is a fair tax or 15% is a fair tax, right? And I think the principle of personal finance that I've learned from all the guests that we've had and just in general is that you people who care about their personal finances care about where every inch of it is going. And that includes where their tax money is going as well. So that's just a disclaimer for people who think this is like we don't want
Tax
people to pay any tax. That's not necessarily the case. So if I know you have kids.
Yeah.
So if you had to tell them, if you were giving them advice and they were like, Father, what what is your tax advice for me as I'm growing through life? Like, how should I navigate this? What should I do to
Yeah.
make sure that I'm living a tax efficient life, let's say? What advice would you be giving to them?
I think the first thing is like, so we can talk about tax efficiency, but one of the first things that I've always taught my children, and I try and teach them a lot, and so does my wife, is that you need to save more than you spend. Because we can talk about tax efficiency, we can talk about what to invest in, equities over property, but if you don't have the money to do it in the first place, there's not a lot to talk about.
True.
So that basic principle of do not spend every penny that you earn, and always try and put some of it away is something that I've ingrained in them. And then my next principle to them will be to use the vehicles that are around you. You don't have to be super clever and trying to come up with all these complicated and weird structures. Actually, just doing the basics right. So each year have you topped up your ISA if you're in the UK. Each year have you put in the maximum you can into your pension for later on. Super, super tax efficient. Those basic things are things that people miss, and they're looking for this solution over there that is really complicated and probably just massively unnecessary. A lot of the work we do is actually unpicking, and this is for high net worth and ultra high net worth, is unpicking complicated things that do not need to be complicated, that people have set them up because they're like, you could set up this limited company, it could be owned by this trust, and it could be that, and it's a lot of the times for normal people, a pension, an ISA, and maybe an offshore personal portfolio bond. And again, obviously, this isn't financial advice; it has to be individual to the person. But they're like easy things to set up, super tax efficient, and they'll probably do what the vast majority of people need them to do.
Would you want them to be entrepreneurs or would you want them to work for a company?
I would want them to be entrepreneurs if it made them happy.
Okay.
Because I don't think everyone is. I think everyone's like, I need to be an entrepreneur and I need to own my own business. But actually, a lot of people are much happier employed than they will be owning their own business. And just because, let's say, as a financial planner, I'm a great financial planner, doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to be a great business owner of something that delivers financial planning. It's two different skill sets. So if they possess those skill sets and that makes them happy, I will encourage them to be entrepreneurs. I would love for them to be entrepreneurs and own their own businesses. However, at the same time, it's going to stress them out, and they're going to lose their self-worth and identity by trying to pursue something. For me, then I'd much rather them be employed.
I like that. So I have a lot of clients who are based in the UK, for example, and let's say they're investing in Dubai because they want to take advantage of the tax system there. But then there's always this issue of like, do I bring my money back into the UK? And then what are the tax implications then? Do I keep my money in Dubai? Is that better? What advice? Obviously, it's very difficult to just kind of give advice like this because and when people ask me these questions, I'm like, there are so many different factors as to what the response could be. But what would your general advice be with people who are kind of maybe investing? They're in a high tax country and maybe they're investing abroad to kind of take advantage of tax benefits.
I think first off, you need to be very clear on the tax rules in your country. So if you're a UK resident, you're a UK tax resident, and you are you are a UK tax resident, you have to pay tax on your worldwide income, regardless of where it's at. So if I have a rental property in Dubai that I've invested in and I'm based here, and it's held in my personal name, I should be paying income tax on the rent that I earn. So you can't shield it just because it's over there. Could only be shielded if it was held in some kind of entity and the control of that entity was clearly in that country as well. So I couldn't hold it in an entity, be director of it, and be making all the management decisions from the UK. And that's where we see quite a lot of people come a cropper. That there are ways and means to set it up, but first off, it's being super, super clear on your own personal tax situation before you kind of start looking to invest abroad and what that means.
Yeah, that's good. You kind of touched on like the non-dom system and this whole taxing of income worldwide. This is a new thing. Am I correct?
So they abolished the remittance basis. So if you were non-domicile or non-dom, as it's probably more commonly known, you were able to be taxed on what calls the remittance basis for a certain number of years. And that would basically mean that you were only taxed on the money that you remitted to the UK. So in this situation with if you were a non-dom and you had a UAE property, but you weren't bringing the income back into the UK, you weren't therefore taxed on it. So that worked really well. And they've abolished that now. And they've got rid of that. And there's a 4-year rule. So once you're allowed 4 years of foreign income to be brought into the UK completely free of tax. But after that, then it will be taxed at your marginal rate of income tax. Broadly speaking, there's obviously with all of these things nuances and specifics that you probably want to get right for yourself, but high level, that's what it is. But there were some really good things that come out of that legislation as well. So, for instance, you looking to be based in Dubai, you might say, okay, previously, if you were a UK domiciled individual, you would be taxed on you would have inheritance tax on your worldwide assets, regardless of where they were in the world. So even if I had a property in Dubai, my business, the holding company for my business is based in the Isle of Man, that would all be subject to inheritance tax. But because I've been a non-UK tax resident now for 10 years, I am now outside the scope of UK inheritance tax. It would only be my UK situs assets, so things like my pension, my properties and things like that I physically hold in the UK would be subject to inheritance tax, which massively lowers it for long-term non-residents. So that's a really interesting development that a lot of people have kind of missed, and they're kind of, they've got rid of this non-dom rule. But actually, if you're planning to be out the UK for a long period of time, it can be super tax beneficial for you.
Being a UK resident, right?
Yeah.
Let's say, because we have a lot of people who are moving to Dubai, right? A lot of people from the UK and Exodus all around, people who are moving to Dubai. What are the benefits of still trying to maintain residency in the UK if you are based in Dubai? Like, should people who have the ability, not people who are moving over for a job, because then obviously your residency changes, people who are back and forth, I know a lot of people who are doing the back and forth thing, should they just have a clean exit from the UK, make sure that they are no longer a resident and keep that residency in Dubai? Or are there any benefits of having your Dubai, your UAE, your Emirates ID card, but maybe still keeping that UK base, maybe in terms of a house, your bank accounts and stuff like that? What would your advice be around that?
I think you can still keep your house, you can still keep your bank accounts. That shouldn't affect your residency too much. You can still keep assets here, and a base here without affecting your residence. So there's something called the statutory residence test, and the statutory residence test is a nice. It's a complex test, but actually there's some really cool flowcharts. So KPMG, I used to work for Deloitte, PwC. They've all got these really cool flowcharts. It's probably not cool, but there's flowcharts that you can work through and determine whether or not you are a long-term resident, how many days you can spend in the country. Because it used to be kind of 90 midnights. If you're in the UK for 90 days or 90 midnights, then you would be classified as a tax resident. Now you can actually spend much more time in the UK, up to 180 days ish if you've been a long-term resident. So, but having ties back to the UK, such as property, such as bank accounts, such as your family being here, and that would be, for instance, your husband or your wife were still based in the UK with your kids, that would be
Yeah.
a tie. So that
Mm.
would reduce the number of days that you could spend without becoming a tax resident. So I don't
Mm.
think those kind of factors help. I still have assets in the UK. It doesn't mean I'm a UK resident, and I still love coming back and seeing my family, and we have offices here, and going and see those guys. Um, However, it is way more tax advantageous to be in Dubai than it is to be a UK tax resident from an income tax perspective, from a capital gains tax perspective, as I just said now, from an inheritance tax perspective. I mean, purely tax. And,
Mm.
because there's two types of things in life. It's like you look at things in terms of what's the most efficient I can be in terms of tax, or actually what is the most commercially viable for me and my own personal situation. Those two don't necessarily always marry up.
Yeah.
So what can be really efficient for tax might be horrendous for your own personal living situation.
Exactly. That's what I was going to get into, because that's why I asked. Because I obviously, when I moved to Dubai in 2023, I was no longer UK tax resident. Thank God. I was so
Yeah.
happy, whatever. But then I found that when I tried to do certain other things, like buy property in the UK, then I was being treated as
Non-resident.
yeah. And then I was like, this is an actual nightmare on so many other different levels. There were so many other little things that came with that you just I guess you just take for granted when you're a resident, that when you leave, you do kind of have to bear that in mind.
So like things like opening a bank account, getting a mortgage, all of those kind of things, which are all doable as a non-resident, but it's
They
much
are.
more specialist and niche.
Yeah.
So you have to go to people such as us. That's the kind of thing that we help people out, not plugging ourselves too much. But there's many other businesses as well that do it, that specialise in helping internationally mobile people get those kind of services, get the banking relationships, get the mortgages.
Yeah.
Now, the mortgages won't be as efficient. So,
Mhm.
you're not going to be able to pop into Santander and get a local mortgage, like that. It will be a bit more of an arduous process, but there are things out there. So it shouldn't deter you, hopefully not deter you too much.
Yeah, that's actually how I found out about you guys, actually.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay. So, a lot of your work, I'm sure, is focused on, well, like you said, dealing with high net worth, ultra high net worth individuals.
Mm.
Are there any like money, wealth lessons that you've learned from them that you think would be good to share?
Yeah, I mean, I do work now. I haven't always. I think like most people in your career, you kind of transition in, working with different circles and build up over time. But what I've learned from working with them is the really wealthy ones are typically first generation wealth. So as in they have made the money themselves.
Hmm.
And a lot of them are very frugal. So they watch what they spend, and they are very conscious of spending typically, and they've been very good at accumulating their money as well. So what do I mean by that? I mean that a lot of the times I see like, and accumulating wealth is one thing, but why are you accumulating wealth? So for a lot of them that have accumulated real wealth, it was never the actual purpose to accumulate big wealth. Like the purpose was they really enjoyed what they were doing. They were super good at it, and they've been rewarded insanely well along the way for doing, like, some of the people we deal with, worth hundreds of millions of pounds. Yeah, not all of that unfortunately is with us, but they have done very, very well for themselves, and they're super focused and super into what they're doing. And I think that's, that's for me was really interesting. And other things that they've told me along the way is like, having lots of possessions doesn't make you happy. And I know you kind of hear this all the time, but they're like, having a massive house hasn't made me happy. Having fast cars and flash stuff hasn't made me happy. What's actually really made me happy is spending time around the people that I want to spend my time with. So a lot for them, that's their kids. A lot of it's their family, and being able to do things with them. So actually, I've realised that being around these people is that don't let lifestyle creep get in, which I think a lot of people that do move to places like Dubai, and even here, they get a pay rise, they spend a little bit more, they move to somewhere tax free, they then go on a couple of extra holidays, and all of a sudden, all you end up doing is your wealth starts depleting. Whereas a lot of the successful and happy, which is also important, people that we work with, they're very, you would never know that they had lots of money. They're just very, very themselves. They're not trying to be something they're not.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are surprised when we've had when a guest comes on and say that like some of the most successful people they know or some of the most wealthy people they know are very conscious of spending their money, because I guess when you don't have money, you think to yourself, when I get money, I'm going to be splashing out, I'm going
Yeah.
to do this, I'm going to do that. And then that principle for people who actually have money doesn't always necessarily apply. But I guess sometimes what we see of those who are wealthy online would make you think that this is what wealthy people do.
Yeah.
Flashy cars, all the different sort, especially in Dubai, all the different sorts of colors of G-wagons that you could ever see. So you would assume that, okay, this is what life is like. But then we've had a lot of guests who've come in and say that actually that's not what the majority of them are actually like. So that's interesting.
Yeah, look, if you are unhappy, a 10,000 square foot house is not going to make you any happier. Like, you know, if you are unhappy, is driving a McLaren to work versus a BMW going to make you any happier? It might put a little bit of a smile on your face, but you're still probably going to be unhappy deep down.
Yeah.
And you know, and again, a lot of the happiness that people generally derive is experiences, it's being around people they love, it's spending time, it's quality of relationships, it's those kind of things. And you know, again, that's really what it's taught me working with these people.
Yeah. And I think that the idea is, or what I get from that is, it's not that money is not important,
100%.
because I think nobody wants to be, I'd rather be rich and unhappy than broke and unhappy.
Yeah.
But I think it's the fact that money allows you, or in some people's cases, it will allow you to spend more time with your family, because some people can't because they have to work
Yeah.
all the time. If you're enjoying this content, please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. And if you would like to become an international property investor in Dubai or in the UK, the link to book a free consultation will be in the description box below. If you're not quite ready to invest yet, check out the affordable video courses that will also be linked in the description box below. And if you would like to relocate to Dubai, set up your business in Dubai, or anything else related to relocating to Dubai, check out www.theprofessionalnetwork.com. So yeah, I'm really interested in what made you decide to start Hoxton Wealth.
Look, I've always wanted to own my own business. That was the truth of the matter. I always wanted to operate and work for myself. So I have a real passion for business. I have a passion for financial planning, but I have a real passion for business. You know, when I was growing up, I did the normal kind of things that people do. I'd go around and wash people's cars. I started a landscape gardening business that my dad told me to stop because I decided it'd be a great idea to go and hand out flyers around the richest area near where we lived. And some guy randomly called me up and said, "Oh, I want you to come give me a quote for landscaping my garden." So I turned up with my tape measure, put together this quote that I had no idea on, and sent it to him. He's like, "Yeah, great. When can you start?" And I was like, "Oh, brilliant." And I went and told my dad, all excited. And he was like, "You're going to get sued. What you doing? It's going to come back to me." So he made me stop it.
Wait, did you do the guy's garden?
No, I didn't. I never went back. He never saw me again. And then I didn't take any money, obviously. I had a tax returns business that I started when I was at KPMG doing tax returns, and I've always had this kind of entrepreneurial bug. The funny thing about the tax returns business is I went out and got an 0800 number, but I didn't let anyone know of my 0800 number, so no one ever called it as well. So I had all these bizarre ideas. So it was always kind of traveling in that direction. And when I left KPMG, I went to work for a company called Devere. Devere was owned by my friend's dad that I went to school with. And I saw him set up and operate this business. I didn't see him set it up, but I knew of him when he set it up. And I saw him become really successful and build a massive business over time. I was kind of like, wow, if he can do it, then I believe a lot of your own limiting factors are based upon yourself. A lot of people tell themselves they can't. And I genuinely believe that I could. So I'm very, very lucky as well that I've got a super supportive wife as well. So she was on at me to go and do it. It'd been very easy. We had a very comfortable life. I was doing very well at my previous business. So, it wasn't kind of I've got to go and do this just to try and, make things work, which sometimes makes it actually a bit harder. But I believe myself and, I wanted to go and do it. So myself and my school friend Matt started it from my kitchen table with my PA and a couple of others that joined. And we started the business and it went from there.
Did you poach them from Devere Group?
Yeah. Well, they were working for me. So how a lot of these businesses work is that you operate your own team.
Okay.
So they were working within my team. So I didn't go and poach a lot of staff, but they when you set up, it's like most things. A lot of people are kind of looking for different. People are looking for something new, something fresh, something different.
Yeah.
And I think we offered that. We went from international financial advice has always been quite what am I going to put it? It's always been quite commission driven. So we started off a fee based planning service
Okay.
where we would operate off fees instead of commission. We focus more on the assets that we manage and long term holistic planning for people, whereas just trying to get a product, sell a product to them and then move on to the next. So it being a lot less transactional and a lot more around relationships, and that's proved to be really good. And that's how financial advice is in the UK and the US. So we saw that as an opportunity to try and bring that internationally.
So you said you started with 35 million. So I'm guessing those were
Mm,
the clients you had whilst you were there as well.
they're my
They came with
clients.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And then how did you scale to 3 billion plus so quickly?
Having good people come and work with us. We've bought a few businesses as well along the way. So we've acquired. So we only started acquiring last year, but a lot of it has been down to um, business development. And I think that's what a lot of entrepreneurs forget. So a lot of people have a great idea, but they don't actually have a go-to-market strategy. They don't actually focus on, all right, well, am I going to go out and get this in front of people? And it's always been the other way around. I've noticed when I was operating at Devere that they were very, very, very good at going to generate new business. So they were very, very good at getting people in the door. And I knew that would be really important to make this succeed. And I think putting yourself out there and trying to get in contact with people and let them know of your service. Financial planning is pretty boring. It's very rare that people actually go, oh, today I'm going to go and try and find a financial planner. Normally something happens, or normally something, a lifestyle event occurs and they realize, or a life event occurs and they realize that they need a financial planner. And a lot of the times it's just being there at the right time. It's also making contact with them and letting them know of the services that you offer and that you can help them with. And that's what we've been, super good at. And we have a whole machine. There's 100 people in our business that are dedicated to business development. And we take it really, really seriously. And that's what's driven a lot of the growth. I mean, put that into perspective, what does that actually mean? So this year we've onboarded £500 million of new assets into the business. So 100 million of that has come from a business that we purchased, but 400 million of that has come from organic. So by organic, we mean new people into our business that our advisors have spoken to and they're working with, which is, again, to kind of put that into perspective within financial planning, 2 to 3% of organic inflows a year is considered good. We're at, we'll be plus 20-25% this year.
So that go-to-market strategy, when you started, what does that practically look like? I mean, I'm guessing maybe today. Actually, I don't know if social media works as well for high net worth, ultra high net worth
Mm.
clients. But what does that strategy look like?
It's multi-pronged. So it's not
Mm.
one thing over something else. So one of the easiest ways that I can get hold of you is to call you.
Mhm.
So I can call you and see if you're interested in my service.
But how would you know who to call?
So you can be very targeted with your marketing. So there's people that can help you build lists. So I can say, I want to speak to people that are between 40 and 50 in this profession, roughly on this income. Can you help me get into contact with them? So direct marketing is massively underlooked, sometimes frowned upon, but I think is a really interesting way to let people know of your service. Second thing is ads. So we spend a lot of money now, and we've ramped that up over time, obviously, on advertising. You can be super direct with advertising, Facebook, Instagram, Google, all of that kind of stuff. So I can put things in front of you. We run seminars, we run webinars, we get referrals from existing clients, we put on events. All of this, we're at exhibitions, all of these things. So it's not one thing that, we have to generate thousands of potential people to get bums on seats and to be able to convert them into clients. Most businesses boil down to three things. So prospecting, converting that prospect into a client, and then retaining that client. Most businesses will fall, service-based businesses will fall into that category. Most people focus on the conversion and the retention. They forget the prospecting. And the prospecting is so important, super important if you're trying to start out a business. That's where the majority of your effort wants to be put into.
So a client comes to Hoxton Wealth.
Mm.
What are some of the key lessons that you would be sharing with your financial advisory clients?
So the first thing is understanding why they want to build wealth. Like your version of why you want to build wealth will be different to mine.
Mhm.
It might not be different to someone else's. It's very personal. So the first thing is rather than going, well, you should have £1 million saved. It's like, well, why do you need £1 million saved? Or why do you want this level of income? Or why do you, what does your journey look like? And, depending upon where you are or how old you are will, depend ultimately what things that you want to do. So you mentioned you wanted to buy a house. Another thing, maybe or maybe not, might be a wedding. Another thing might be having children. Another thing might be children's education. Another thing might be, a second house or a holiday home. Then you start looking at retirement income. All of these things, we help them plan and get a good idea of like what's important to you, what's on your bucket list, what are the things you want to do. Like really help them understand, because when you start with the why, when you're putting your £5,000 a month away or whatever, 3,000 or 1,000 or £100, whatever it is, there's a clear why as to why you're doing it. And that means that you remain focused on that why. You want that house, you want that holiday, you want that car, you want whatever it is that's important to you. If you don't have that why, then you're just putting it away for the sake of it, and kind of completely, you lose yourself after a while with doing it. You lose the reason, and then you don't do it. So I think attaching that why to it, so that's what we really try and understand initially with our clients.
And if your client came and let's say they were maybe 28, relatively good income, and they said, "Listen, I want to retire early." What advice would you give?
Well, so when are we looking to retire?
What's retire early? 40?
40, wow, okay.
Oh, is that young?
That is young. I mean, look, 40 is quite young. I mean, it depends. And I suppose then it would be like, okay, why do you want to retire early? What do you want to do when you retire?
Let me rephrase this. Let's say rather than retire early, like I don't want to do anything, I want to get myself to a point where I don't have to work.
Okay.
I don't have to work if I don't want to.
Fine. So it's all about building up a level of income by the time you get to 40 that's going to support you.
Yeah.
So some kind of pot or some kind of income stream from an asset, whatever that might be, or it might be multiple multiple things. So first off, it's deciding what income that would be. Like, so what income is that? And that's what you really need to understand is, some people that might be £20,000 a month, some people it might be two. And that will help us understand, well, actually, how much do you need? And then so we focus on the destination to start off with. But then we plan it back and go, okay, well, you're here. You need to get to there. How do we bridge that gap? And what does that look like? So you might say, okay, well, I'm going to put £1,000 a month into my ISA, and I'm going to put £1,000 a month into my pension. And, I'm actually going to put £1,000 a month away for a property that I'm going to invest in that gives me some income that I can, that I can live off when I get to retirement, which is, property is an interesting subject, which I'm sure we'll get onto. But it's they're the kind of things that we'll start talking to them about.
And what would this person's spending financial habits look like if someone came and told you, listen, I want to retire early? What are you expecting their spending and financial habits to look like?
I'm expecting them to be extremely frugal if they're 28 and they want to retire by the time they get to 40 and have big income that they can put away. Because you're going to have to take short-term sacrifice for long-term gain if that's what you want to do. And if you want to retire when you're 40, average life expectancy for a female in the UK, I think is about 85 at the moment. Oh. That's 45 years that you're going to have to live off of this income from. Because what you don't want to do is get to 70 and have run out of money. So, I would expect them to be very disciplined. I would expect them to have high levels of income and the ability to put a lot away. And I'd probably have expected them already to have started.
There's a quote that I heard from you on maybe another podcast, maybe on your LinkedIn, and it was like, "Show me your bank account, and I'll show you what's important to you." And actually, I don't know, where did you get that from?
It definitely isn't my own quote.
I think it's a verse from the Bible. It's not said exactly like that, but It's like, show me your treasure, and I will show you where your heart is.
Okay.
So I think it's from that, but I think it's a super interesting quote, which is basically like, well, you explain it. You used it.
Yeah, well, I think ultimately, number one, I don't know who I stole it off, but I definitely stole it off someone. So if it was the Bible, then I'm glad it was from a good credible source. But I think that it's to me what it means is that a lot of people say they're interested in saving for their retirement. They want to retire when they're 40. And I suppose this is what I was kind of saying before about the discipline and being frugal. They say, yeah, I want to retire when I'm 40, but then they have zero money to save every month. They're not saving a penny. They're going out, eating out all the time. You're not serious about retiring early. You are serious about enjoying and living for the moment. So I can see that from looking at your bank account because you have nothing left at the end of each month. So that's what I mean when I say it, is your spending will dictate and show me really who you are.
Yeah. And what you care about.
Exactly.
Yeah, I even had to have like an assessment about that lately because I remember.
Sound like the doctor, yeah.
No, but seriously, it was just about. I guess this was like a couple years ago actually, and I was I don't know. I think it was from like a sermon. I think it was a sermon that was like, "Show me your treasure, and I'll show you where your heart is," whatever. And I was looking at it, and I think one of my goals for that year, or I said I was serious about my health or something like that. And I was like, "There's no gym membership on here. There's no I don't know, ordering healthy food on here. It's just a lot of takeouts and this and this and that." And this is not necessarily tied in with like trying to achieve financial freedom or stuff. But I think when you do go through your bank statement in general, and I think everyone should do this, when you start seeing what your expenses are, you will start to see what is actually important to you. And for some people, it might be maybe a huge chunk is your house. And it may be that, I don't know, maybe you've got a big family, so that's the case. Or it may be that you're actually really concerned with impressing other people, so you really want to have a big house. Or maybe it's a car. I know so many people who their car cost is like 20% of their income. And I'm just like, I mean, it's none of my business, but like that's clearly what is important to you.
Yeah.
Flexing to other people.
Yeah.
So I think everyone has to run that assessment and see where your spending is, because it will really show you what is important to you. And it's more of an indicator of what really is important to you versus what you say is important to you. So I do really like that quote.
Could not agree more with you. I think it's, and you don't do it, like you said, a lot, you just don't ever go through it and go, oh, actually, Deliveroo's really important to me, kind of thing. But it is tough. And I love that car example as well. I was driving down the road the other day, and the houses down the street probably were worth, say 600, 700,000 man. And there was a G-Wagon parked outside, 150, 200 grand car. And and I know that it was the person that lives there because I've drive down that road a lot and see it there. And it was just like, that's a third of your house cost is parked outside the front of it in a car that's a depreciating asset. But if that's important to them, and that's what gets them out of bed and what motivates them, and that's what they're really interested in, who am I to say that that's a silly thing to spend your money on? And that's the kind of thing which is what is important to you.
Yeah.
You should not be dragged into what's important to other people, because that will make you desperately unhappy over time.
And if someone was on a good financial path, because I know that one thing a lot of people love is to kind of have like this milestone check of like, okay, if I'm 30 with this in my assets or this in my account or this much saved, then I'm doing a good job. If I'm 40, and I know that that's not necessarily always the best way to look at it, because everyone's situation differs vastly. But if you are going to give some milestones, let's say maybe you were giving that advice to your children, or like, okay, by 20, this is what you would really want to have going on, by 30, by 40, by 50, what would you say?
Well, okay, let's just look at it kind of practically. So like in your 20s, I feel like a lot of people beat themselves up because they're not knowing where they want to be and they're not really focused on it. I think just in your 20s or at the end of your 20s, having a clear direction of where you want to be, what kind of person you are, have an idea of where you want to live, all of that kind of stuff, just having it figured out. Maybe, you've got your career on track. Like by the end of your 20s, if you've got that stuff done, I think you're in a good place. When you're in your 30s and you're starting to come in, that's when typically people meet their, life partner that they'll be with, hopefully, if that's for them and that's what they want to do. So then you would expect during that period, it would be things like having children, getting married, maybe buying your first house. If you had accomplished those things in your 30s, I think that would be a nice big tick. Your 40s is where you really start to get serious and people will take you much more seriously in terms of your career as well. I think that's happening slightly earlier, maybe towards the back end of your 30s, but no one's really taking you seriously in your career in your 20s. Like, I maybe that's just me, but I feel that when you're in your late 30s, early 40s, that's when people really start taking you seriously. So in your 40s and 50s is really we're going to maximize your income. So there is where you really want to start putting away heavily for retirement and later on in life, and not living paycheck to paycheck during those periods. But up until then, it's very difficult. And again, a lot of people beat themselves up. You're new in your career. You're not at your peak earnings. You're starting a family. You're trying to buy a house. Like all of this stuff, you're not going to have huge amounts of disposable, and people get really negged out by it. And I would just say be kinder to yourself, because it happens later on for a lot of people. And actually, there's some weird stat that most the average age of a billionaire is 69. It's not 20.
Yeah.
So if you're 40 and you're still not there yet, then you've probably got you've still got a good chunk to go. And then 60 between 60 to 70 is when most people will retire. People are retiring later now, and then they go on and enjoy their life and go from there. And broadly speaking, I think if you are hitting some of those goals during those periods, then that's normal. That's cool. That's good.
Mm.
I think I think where I see a lot of things now is when people beat themselves up constantly. I'm not where I need to be, and I need to be here, and I need to be there. And my message on that is good things take time. A lot of people massively underestimate what they can do, or massively overestimate what they can do in a year, but massively underestimate what they can do in 10. And good, like being disciplined and focused over long periods of time really is where success is derived from. Jumping and flittering from thing to thing, bit to bit, every year, every 6 months, you will never get anywhere fast.
Yeah. I think so many things are so interesting. One, I think it reminds me of something another guest said, which was like he was basically saying that your 20s should be focused on learning. So like shouldn't be worried too much about like how much you're earning and stuff. And then he was saying 30s onwards, then you can start focusing a bit more on earning. But I think it also, and even when you mentioned that the average retirement age for women in the UK is 85, it reminds
Death.
me
Sorry.
death.
Yeah, death. That's when they
Death.
die.
Yeah, no, life expectancy. Life expectancy. Sorry, that was the one. It just reminded me of. I think I was listening to like some doctors speaking. They were saying that one of the things that kind of woke them up. These were young doctors when they started working in the healthcare system. Was that someone who is 40 was still considered young? Like from a doctor's or medical perspective, they would still be considered young. And the reason why I say that is because I think when you're younger, like my age, whatever, you do kind of see like 40s as like old, 50, you feel like it's old. So that's why the pressure is kind of on your 20s and 30s. You kind of want to have it all figured out and everything invested because you feel like, oh, by the time I get to 40, 50, I'm going to be old. But actually the life expectancy is a lot longer than that. So I think that's good. But if someone was saying that, okay, that is like the average milestones. If I wanted to be exceptional and I wanted to be in a really, really strong financial position, how would you rework those milestones?
I'd rework them earlier. So you want to be really, geared up for retirement or geared up to stop working. You have to start getting really serious about this in your teens, not in your 20s.
Ooh, teens.
Yeah, I mean, look, so, if you start saving when you're 16 or when you're 18 and you start putting money away and getting in great habits, then you will be in an amazing position come your late 30s, early 40s. Most people don't really start to save until they're back into their 20s, start their 30s, if at all. So if you think you've got nearly 15 years on someone at that point, then you're going to be in a good position. And those habits that you developed early will be, will be very, will serve you well for the rest of your life.
One of the things that you're quite vocal on is that buying a home is one of the worst investments. But you've mentioned also that you have 17 properties, but you don't live in the one that you don't rent. You rent the one that you currently live in.
Correct.
So what's the thought behind that?
Look, I think property as an asset class is not a great performing asset class. It's just call it for what it is. I mean, that if you're looking for pound invested, it's one of the worst performing asset classes. It's not one of the best performing asset classes. So, I've got stats to back that up as well.
But okay, property in the UK doubles every 10 years. That's not good enough.
Well, I would say if you was investing in, okay, well, I've got some stats actually because I knew he was gonna come on to this. So, stats over the past 10 years in real estate. So the average total return from the Dubai Property Index, if you'd invested in it from 2015 right at the start to the end of 2024, was if you'd invested 100,000, you would the return would have been 115,420. Yeah.
Okay.
So you'd have done well, but you hadn't done amazing. The average return from the UK House Property Index over that same 10-year period was 175,000.
Okay.
Yeah, and the average return from investing in
175,000.
£175,000. So if you invested 100,000,
Okay.
you'd have made a return of 175.
A return, so only 75,000.
So you would have made a return of 100 plus your
100. Okay.
And if you'd invested in the MSCI World Index, it'd have been 271,000 over those same 10 years. Yeah. So the point is that's without taking in, that's just capital. Now, I'll caveat that with also there might have been certain areas in the UK or certain areas in Dubai that you could have invested in. But there also might have been certain stocks that I could have invested in within the MSCI world, such as Nvidia or something like that, that would have done way better than the average market. So I'm trying to take the market as overall. If we look over the past 5 years, so we go, okay, well, actually in those from 2015 to 2020, pretty much every year Dubai property made a loss.
Really?
Yeah. So in 2050, the Dubai house price index was down 11%. 2016, it was pretty flat, minus 0.5%. 2017, minus 3.85%. 2018, minus 8.56%. 2019, minus 6%. 2020, minus 7.12%.
How is that calculated?
That is calculated on the Dubai house price index.
But that's so contradictory to a lot of stuff that I've seen.
But then you've seen it. Now what you've seen is from 2021 to 2024. It's absolutely blown the socks off of it. So 2021, it made 9.25%. 2022, it made 9.53%. 2023, it made 20.14%. 2024, it made 18.03%.
Okay.
So you've made a lot of money over the past 5 years had you invested. And again, certain areas, maybe such as the Palm or Jumeirah Golf Estates or these places, have probably blown that out the water as well. That's the average of the price index. The UK property over the past 5 years, 7%, 10.8%, 9.8%, 4.1, 3.3 on an average. Whereas MSCI World, 2020, 16.5%, 2021, 22.35, 2022, minus 17.73. So it did have quite a big downward trend when property did remain quite stable. 2023, 24.42, 2024, 19.9%.
Okay. So your conclusion is?
My conclusion is that I like investing in property because I think it provides a good passive income. It is quite management intensive. I'd rather have my money invested in a stable asset class as well as other investments as well. My wife likes it. She gets stability out of it. I can definitely see. In terms of my own property, what I've done is instead of investing a lump sum of money directly into my into my house where it was dead money, I bought 4 rental properties. So I invested in 4 rental properties in the same area that my house is in on the basis that I would be able to generate an income from that would fluctuate in line with my rent of my property. But actually the capital sum I had to put in was less than if I put it into my house. And then that gave me the flexibility to live where I liked. Now, saying that, I really wish I would have bought my house because it's gone up in an insane amount.
Yeah.
And because of the area. But those things kind of happen. But it does give me a lot of flexibility. And actually, what a lot of people don't realise is if you have a 25-year mortgage, which a lot of people do, some people have 30-year mortgages, the first 5 years are predominantly paying off interest. They're not paying off capital. So actually, you're as good as renting anyway. You might get some capital appreciation, admittedly, but it's if it was to stay the same, it's it's a very similar investment. Another reason why people really like investing in property is because they hold it for a long term. People get freaked out with investing in the markets, and because it's so liquid, they quickly sell it. So you can dump all of your shares tomorrow pretty easily at that. You can't dump your house tomorrow unless you take a massive discount on it. And there's no price above your house which flashes every day and tells you the price.
That's the thing, yeah. So it feels like stocks are more volatile because you can see it moving all the time.
But in 2020, let's say take it. I mean, the house price index would suggest differently. But in 2020, if every time you went outside your house and it plummeted down to the ground and then it went back up again, would you freak out? Do you think more people would freak out and sell? The answer is yes. But it's weird because when we sit down with people and we go through what's the fact find, so they tell you the value of their assets and how much income they've got. And during those periods, you'd say, "What's the value of your house?" And they go, "It's not changed since last year." And you're like, "Well, I could." If your portfolio is down 10%, I would imagine your house would probably be down somewhere in between. But it's because, excuse me, it's because people have that long-term thought on their long-term thought train on property, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
And you should be invested in most asset classes for a long period of time. You shouldn't be invested in it for a short period of time.
Mm. So it's interesting because I think one of the best things about property that you've basically mentioned and which is probably one of the reasons why you have it, is that it gives you that income, and that income is relatively stable. But is your opinion then? Do you find it more beneficial is someone, because I think you did specify that you're buying a home, so that does your opinion stand for both investing in property to have an investment portfolio and get income, or is it mainly if you're buying property for your residential home to live in?
I think there is better performing asset classes than property, but also I think property as an asset class to invest in gives you a disciplined structure. So you have to pay a mortgage, you pay that off. You're going to receive some rent, so you can either choose to reinvest that or you can spend it. You're going to hopefully get some capital appreciation over time, although that's not guaranteed. But one of the things that property allows you to do is leverage.
Yes.
And you don't typically do that with stocks.
Yes.
You can do that with stocks. You can apply leverage to it, but that is also, a risky game in itself as well. So people feel much more comfortable taking leverage on that, and typically because it's an asset, the cost of that leverage is typically smaller. Buying a home is a good thing. I don't think that is a bad thing. I wouldn't discourage anyone from buying their own home because I think it provides you security. I think it provides you with a lot of basic needs that you as a human need to fulfill. And for a lot of people, if they're going to hold it for a long period of time, it makes sense for them to have their own home. What doesn't make sense is when people have 3 or 4 homes. That normally does not make sense.
Homes or investment properties? Or both?
Well, second homes, second, third, fourth homes. So a lot of people might have a house here and they have a house in the Middle East. I have a house in the UK and I have a house in Dubai. It's a horrendous investment, my house here, because my wife comes back in it with my children and lives in it when she comes back. It doesn't give me any income. I have to pay money to maintain it. All this stuff is not a good investment, but it's providing a quality of life that I enjoy and that I've made memories in, and all the rest of that stuff. Just because it's makes sense from an investment perspective, again, it's the same with tax, doesn't mean it makes sense commercially to you and your own lifestyle. So I think that needs to be weighed up as well. And a lot of people have holiday homes. They get to, again, crap investment, but they really enjoy the time spent there with their families. They get to make so many memories. Their kids go back there with their kids. It's like you've got to remember that as well.
Yeah, that's why I always, like, when I talk about this stuff, like, there's a difference between like an investment property versus like a lifestyle investment property where it's just for your lifestyle or primarily for your, because some people, myself speaking, I have properties in other places, but I rent it out when I'm not there. So it's not necessarily the best financial investment, but I've kind of weighed up, okay, returns, but then also where do I want to stay? What do I like and stuff? But then I know that that's a lifestyle investment property rather than like an investment property where you are not the main tenant. So there's definitely a difference. But I think, so the only thing that I would want to get your opinion on is that I think my thing with stocks, I'm definitely for like maxing out your ISA and stuff, and I'm sure those stats are make sense and do match up. But like, let's say you,
I hope so.
Hey, listen, someone's gonna write a long
Someone is gonna write
section about how
100%.
it's not true. But I think the thing with property is, let's say you wanted to quit. So I quit my job, right? And stocks would have never given me that assurance to do that. In the same way that property has, because of the income I'm able to get from it.
Okay. So you invested a certain amount, you've made it cash flow positive, so you generate an income. Okay. I mean, like, I would, if that makes, again, you feel secure and makes you do that, I would argue that you probably could.
And get dividend income, but you need to invest way more.
You could get dividend income, you can make cash flow. I mean, look, ultimately what you're banking on is you're taking some of the return and taking that to live off. Is that a fair assumption? You're not reinvesting that. You're not reinvesting that.
I don't actually take it, but in my mind, I'm like, okay, I've got passive income that could cover my cost of living, even though I don't need it.
Yeah,
it gives me that comfort.
Yeah, and again, I would probably argue that you could have that same passive income from an investment strategy. You can buy funds that give you a fixed amount of income. They would draw down from that. You'd have an income share class or an accumulation share class.
But if you draw down, you're affecting the overall investment in the asset, because you're taking away from your like property, when you take income from it, you're not affecting the overall amount that's invested. You're not affecting the capital appreciation. Whereas I feel like with stocks, if you are taking drawdowns, you are affecting the overall amount that can then make money.
Yeah, but you would build your income into your return. So it's your income plus the capital appreciation equals your total return. If you don't have any income and it's just capital appreciation, you could be earning 15% a year on capital appreciation, or you could be earning 4% a year from income and 5% a year from capital appreciation. What's better?
Okay, I like the debate. It's good. I think at the end of the day, you do what's
Encourage
best
it.
for you, but it's good to see that both things can work.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, final question before we move on to the other section is, so your one of the taglines I've seen with your company Hoxton Wealth is like, giving advice for borderless wealth. And obviously this podcast is called Building Wealth with No Borders. I wanted to get your opinion on kind of the benefits of building wealth but having a global outlook, whether that is you moving, whether that is being invested in multiple markets. What's your view on that as a financial advisor?
I think, look, ultimately, as a financial planner, we typically look at global investing. We don't be specific to the UK. The biggest equity market in the world is the US. So naturally, if you're investing, you will have quite a lot of exposure to the US, whether you like it or not. Some weird stat. I think it's like, and don't quote me on this, but it's like 20% of the world's GDP is in the US, but 70% of the world's equity market or something like that sits in the US. It's been huge in comparison to everywhere else. And if the US sneezes, everywhere else catches a cold. So, you do have to take that into account. So when we give advice, we're not looking just UK Pacific. We're very globally focused to make sure that we get in, returns. The US has been, over the past decade, definitely the best returning market, or one of the best returning markets that there is. In terms of where your assets are based, I think you can be fairly UK centric. I don't think you have to be globally centric. But what I've noted about people who do live globally is they're typically more rounded. Their limits and what they believe in are a lot higher or their limits are a lot lower.
Yeah.
Is what I should say, and their beliefs are a lot higher
Yeah.
in terms of what they think is possible. And I think it provides that more rounded approach, for you. If someone said there's an amazing opportunity in New Zealand, I mean, you might think of it because it's quite far away. Maybe that's a bad example, but you wouldn't think if it was a great opportunity, you would go and do it. Whereas some people were very scared about just leaving their own surroundings and home. And I think being globally mobile definitely opens you up to a lot more opportunities as well.
Actually, I have one more question before the next section.
Go for it.
You're quite vocal on parenting on social media. What are some of the things that parents can do to build wealth for their children?
Teaching them the basics, like we said earlier. I massively believe that. Teaching your child at a young age, do not spend all of your money, save a proportion of it. If you can get your child into a habit from the age of 5, making sure with their pocket money, if you give them £5, that they put £1 and then they go and spend 4 at the sweet shop or whatever they want. That is an amazing habit to build at a young age. Saving 20% of your income, 25% of your income. If you could get into that habit and really installing that to them, they will be very, very well set for their stuff. Because everything else you can teach, like investing, but it's those basic habits. It's like me saying, I'm going to teach my children to, manage lots of money. But if they've got no money to manage, it just doesn't. There's no point. They have to get the basics right. So it's all about the basics. Then it's making sure that they understand they don't have to have these whizzy strategies. You've got things like market trackers, ETFs, mutual funds that track the market. You can invest in some of these things, just set and forget, and you don't ever have to think about it ever again. It doesn't have to be complicated what you do. So my thing with them is there's no whizzy investment strategy I'm going to be teaching them. It's always just you put a chunk of what you earn away all the time and you let that accumulate and then you invest it sensibly. You can invest it in an S&P 500 tracker, in an MSCI World tracker. You can buy a property if you really want, but just make sure that it's working hard for you. Don't leave it in the bank.
Do you think that is more valuable than, let's say, gifting them or not gifting them or letting them inherit like a portfolio of properties or setting up a junior ISA account? Or do you think you do both of those things, but the most important things is the habits that you teach them?
100%. Habits that you will teach them. And then obviously making sure one of the things at the moment that I've done with my youngest son is we've invested into a company called TKO. So TKO owns the UFC and the WWE. He's obsessed with the WWE. Now we talk about him being an owner of the WWE, and he really likes that, and that's of interest to him. So it's about finding out what he's passionate about and what he's interested about, and that gives him a bit of an edge as well. Because he watches it all the time. He can see if the WWE is doing bad, I probably should sell my TKO share, or if the WWE is doing really good, they're getting all these amazing people on it. They're like here, there, and everywhere. It's going to do better. I should probably invest more. So taking an interest in and investing in things that you're passionate about and you're interested about for sure. But I don't think inheriting a lot of money. I don't think inheriting a lot of money does anyone any good. I think there's some weird stat. Third generation is typically when you can only keep money for 3 generations.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Before it gets squandered or wasted. I don't know how true that is, but I'm sure there's some truth to it. There's no smoke without fire. But I think if you inherit large sums of money, as I was saying, a lot of the people that I know with large sums of money are typically quite frugal. When it gets handed on to their kids will spend. They will go and buy a new house. They will go and buy a new car. So that's why we encourage the people that we work with to enjoy the money. If you're gifting them 2 million or 1.5 million, doesn't make any difference. It's like go and enjoy the extra bit. Don't be worried about what you're spending it on. And that's my wife's strategy is that, we should enjoy it and you should pass on as less amount as possible and they should work for it. And I think that's a good strategy.
Okay, so we're going to be moving on to the wealth woes section. And this is basically where one of the listeners sends in a question that they have.
Yep.
And they just want your basically opinion,
Mm.
you'd have to say. So this person says, what are the best strategies for starting a business from the ground up? And what about the taxes? Should I get an accountant?
I suppose it depends how you're going to set up your business, doesn't it? To start off with, like, are you going to set up as a limited company? Are you going to be a sole trader? I would probably go for the most cost-effective solution, which would probably be a sole trader initially, depending upon how confident you were that it was going to work. If it was just, like a business that you were going to, you haven't got a lot of experience in and you're just trying to give it a go, then, probably least friction as possible. Whereas if you're experienced in it and you probably, you'd probably want to be more, structured how you would set it up. So a limited company, I would normally advise people to get an accountant. I think that's a worthwhile investment. Making sure that you're keeping your books, making sure that you're filing your company returns and tax returns, etc., on time as well to make sure that you're in good standing. But yeah, I think it's a worthwhile investment having an accountant on site for sure.
Yeah, if you only had like a couple of transactions going on, or let's say you weren't making that much money, would you still advise an accountant? Because I've always had an accountant. But I know some people who use like apps, for example, because they're like, I don't know. I mean, for me, I don't even want to use my brain to get behind everything that needs to be done. So I would rather just use an accountant. But for someone, let's say if they didn't feel like they had the volume or if they didn't want to spend the money, could you just use an app?
Yeah, I imagine there's plenty of good apps out there. I mean, we use in some of our smaller businesses Zero, which is great accounting software.
Okay.
For the smaller businesses, and I mean, look, you can use HMRC's online tax return service to file your own tax returns. It's not like you need whizzy apps or anything as well. I think to do it, but I think you have to be good at record keeping, and you actually have to make sure that you do it.
Yeah.
I use an accountant, and I'm an accountant, and the reason why I use an accountant is because I find it gives me that accountability. Otherwise, when it's your own stuff, you kind of knock it down the road.
Yeah.
Whereas you've got someone chasing you to say, "Well, have you got this? Have you done this?" Then it provides that level of accountability, which I think is also important.
And I think when you're like getting into business and stuff, you also have to ask yourself which part of having a business do I want to learn how to do?
Mm.
Because like if your business, let's say for example, is selling t-shirts or something, do you really want to understand, like get into order? Because also one of the benefits I found with an accountant is questions.
Yeah.
Like, what can I write off as an expense? Like, how do I go about this? How do I lower my tax bill? What about this? What about that? And I mean, you can always chat GPT, but like sometimes it's just better to speak to a person. And there's not all parts of the business in my opinion, should you necessarily learn how to do.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just outsource it. It's easier.
Jack of all trades, master of none.
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
is the saying, isn't it? But yeah, look, I think if it's not complex, then maybe you could probably get away with doing it yourself. If you've got multiple transactions, different currencies going on, different expenses that you want to see if whether they're allowable or not allowable, then definitely worthwhile having an accountant's ear to bend. And normally, maybe after a couple of times you've been with, you've done your yearly returns, then you're comfortable with it and you do it yourself. I know a few people that have done it that way as well, but depends how big your business is.
True. So moving on to the quick fire money
Mm.
questions. This is just 3 questions, and you just tell me what's the first thing that comes to your mind. So first one is, what is the best investment you've ever made?
Backing myself.
Mm,
Starting Hoxton Wealth, that was the best investment I've made by far.
love that. What is the biggest money mistake you've made?
Being stupid and buying things I couldn't afford when I was younger.
Like, what would you
I
buy?
bought cars, I bought trainers, I bought clothes, I was
Mm.
living paycheck to paycheck, all the stuff that I've just said not to do. They're the things that I did.
Okay, and then the final one is, what is one piece of advice you'd give to someone who is trying to build wealth or build wealth globally?
Get a plan in place. Like, think about your plan and think about your desired outcome. Understand the why and why you're doing it, and build that plan around it and stick to it. Be disciplined with it.
What if they say, I don't know what my plan is, I'm not sure.
You must have an idea of what you want, and you like, if you're just saving for the point of it, you will never do as well as if you have a structured goal. Or it's like you're going into this year and going, don't know what I'm going to do this year, might do this, might do that. Whereas normally if you go at the start of the year, well, I'm going to do this, this and this, and then I check in on it regularly to make sure that I'm doing it. I put the small actionable steps that mean I get there. Like, by the end of the year, high likelihood that you've probably done it, as opposed to if you have no goals, you probably coasted through that year and not done a lot. And it goes the same with wealth planning.
I love that. Okay, thank you so much. So if they wanted to find you, or they wanted to find Hoxton Wealth, for example,
And pull me up on my stats.
yeah, where can they
LinkedIn.
find you? Yeah.
So LinkedIn, I'm quite vocal on. We do have a TikTok and an Instagram set up, Chris Ball at Hoxton Wealth. And then obviously our company webpage, www.hoxtonwealth.com, where people can contact us as well if they wish to find out more.
One thing I will plug as well is the Hoxton Wealth app.
Yes.
So I think I've worked with you guys before, but on Instagram. I haven't
Yeah.
mentioned it on YouTube. If you are someone who has lived in multiple countries or has like assets in different countries, well, you could probably explain that better. But why I liked it was I could see like the entirety of my net worth. I can connect my UK bank accounts, my UAE bank accounts, and it kind of brings it all together, converts it into one currency, so you can see your current like net worth, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And then we've also built some extra tools in now that you can do the whole planning piece that I was talking about. So you can enter your income, you can enter your expenses, and it gives you this beautiful cash flow planning graph of this is how much you're going to have. You'll run out of money here with different growth rates, use different inflation rates. So it really enables you to get in detail, and it's completely free. So anyone can use it. You can link your accounts. You can write in your accounts manually, however you feel comfortable. But again, just that regular check-in to make sure that you're going where you need to be is super important. And we thought it was really important that people had that and didn't have to pay for it.
Yeah, and even if you're not global, actually, because even just being able to connect all of your UK accounts, if you have like a Starling, a Monzo, Barclays or whatever, having that all connected into one place is really helpful. So I'll also link that down in the description box. But thank you, Chris, for coming.
Thank you so much for having me.